I'm here with three individuals, each of whom are considered by many to be the greatest of all time in each of their respective disciplines. The greatest MMA fighter of all time, George St-Pierre. The greatest martial arts coach of all time, John Danaher. And the greatest submission grappler of all time, Gordon Ryan. So let me ask the first question. You guys didn't see the question, no preparation here. What is the key to your success, each of you? One thing or multiple things that come to mind. John, go first. Is it the rash guard?
Yes.
I like that you choose John right off the bat.
You seem the most nervous.
Please inspire us to give the right answer.
For me, it's about finding a way to work in a world where most of the answers are already known. Okay, in any developed sport, by the time you enter that sport, most of the basic precepts, the major techniques, the major mechanical understandings of the sport are long since worked out. And so, in a highly developed world, the key to success is to be able to identify some area of the industry that you're in, which is currently undervalued.
To do what the other people are not doing.
Deeper than that, everyone has a view of, okay, these are the main skills of the industry I work in. At any given time, some set of skills, attributes, will always be somewhat undervalued. They're underappreciated by the people in the game. You see that in any given industry, there are always trends which change the nature of the industry over time. So fashion trends in the clothing industry, you'll see at any given time there's a general wave of fashion which pushes most of the people in the industry in a given direction at a given time. What makes people stand out is the ability to look at the various possibilities out there and say, here is something which is genuinely useful, but which is currently being underused, underutilized. And I want to bring that back in and develop it. And because it's an inherently useful product, it will be very, very successful in its initial applications against people who aren't currently using it. If you can do this in whatever industry you're in, I believe you'll be highly successful.
So this applies both for actual specific techniques and the
also tactics as well in the case of jiu-jitsu. So, for example, in my sport, leg locks have always been around. Okay, there's no shortage of people you can look back in history who are applying leg locks. Nonetheless, across the industry, leg locks were undervalued and underappreciated. There was a general sense in which most of the leading figures of the sport, for most of the history of the sport of jiu-jitsu, tended to de-emphasize leg locks. And when I looked at them, I said there was immense potential, but it wasn't being realized and needed to be changed. Since then, that has more or less occurred. Now, most people coming into the sport understand that leg locks are an important aspect, and they're no longer undervalued. If anything, it's gone too far the other way, and now perhaps they're a little overvalued. And this kind of fashion trend exists in every industry. And the job of anyone who wants to excel in a given industry is to be able to identify, okay, what are the things that are currently out of fashion and undervalued? And then look at what is their actual objective value, and then work to bring them back to the forefront.
So John brought up fashion. George is wearing a really sexy shirt. So assuming that's not the reason, is there is there something that comes to mind as the key to the success of your incredible career?
Well, of course, everybody knows the famous answer that every athletes are saying, oh, it could be genetic. I was maybe gifted, I had certain predisposition, I worked really hard. But I think something that people don't talk enough is when everybody sometimes go right, I was never afraid to try to go left. And I felt many times trying to do things that were not known to be things that would brought me success, but I tried it. I was very often I was the first of trying new things, and I felt many times, but certain times it gives me a certain advantage. And for example, I was sometimes fighting guys that had much better wrestling background than me on paper, and nobody before that fought those guys. Nobody had dared to try to take them down because their wrestling pedigree were so good. And I didn't have on paper the wrestling pedigree to take these guys down in a fight. But when everybody tried to go right, I was going left. I fought them in a different way. And that was the blueprint to beat some of these guys. You know what I mean? So
yeah, so we'll actually talk about a few fights where you did just that. It's fascinating. But let's stay at the high level. So Gordon, again, sticking on fashion. May I compliment your incredible badass hat?
Trying to fit in here.
We should say we're in Texas now, so he's become a Texan overnight. So what is there something you can speak to that you would attribute to as the key to your success?
Yeah. So first of all, there has to be a rule where you don't ask us all the same questions, because how am I supposed to compete with the answer John just gave? That was like, there's nothing I can do that's going to top that.
Yeah.
But I think it's there's many things, but I think the number one thing is John. When I came in, I was a blue belt, and I was beating brown and black belts in competition already. But he really changed my way of thinking about the sport. I would just come in, and if something wasn't working, I would just do it harder and faster and more aggressively, and that just degenerated into me spastically knee sliding into cross hashigurami against Eddie Cummings for 6 months, and then just getting heel hooked repeatedly. And I'm like, this is not working. And Eddie, like when I met him, was like a chubby librarian looking guy. And I'm like 6'2", like jacked, like 170. And I'm like, there's no way I'm losing to a guy who looks like this. But he just kept heel hooking me. So I would just go harder and harder, and it wouldn't work. And then John's like, well, if you learned leg locks, you might have some more success. And then I was like, yeah, that probably makes sense. And from then on, I kind of just changed the way I thought about the sport. Instead of doing things harder, I would actually try to get better at jiu-jitsu.
Do you remember like a turning point where you became, as opposed to being mediocre, not just in technique, but in approach to great?
I think it was somewhere around brown belt level when I was training consistently. Started training full-time with John when I was purple belt, mid-level purple belt. And towards the end of my brown belt days, I was beating up like legitimate like ADCC champions in the gym. So I think like brown to black belt was a big thing for me. And then when I won my first EBI, and I submitted Yuri, who won ADCC, and I beat Rustam. So I think that was like my turning point as a competitor. But I think I started to reach world level a little bit before that. I think somewhere around brown belt, mid-level to late level brown belt.
So is some of that mental? Like, was there a moment when you, like after a training session, you realized I could actually do this? Like I could be at the top of the world, like world class.
The critical moment for me was when I think it was right when I got my black belt, or maybe a few months before I got my black belt. We had a former ADCC champion come into the gym, and we did a hard round together, and I think I submitted him like 4 or 5 times. And no one knew who I was. I never won anything up until that point. And I was like, okay, like if this is like one of the best guys in the world, and I could submit him multiple times around, I think that this is like something that I actually could do professionally and make a career out of this.
Okay, so the actual performance was you didn't need to believe before you could perform. Like a lot of Olympic gold medalists, they have to believe before they can perform, because like they're getting their ass kicked for a long time.
Yeah, I think, but the best way for me to believe in something is to have repeated success doing it against high-level guys. Like, I'm not going to just believe I can do a double leg if I can't hit a double leg on anybody. So for me, the belief came from the repeated success in the gym.
Yeah, but to get to the point where you're submitting somebody like Yuri Samoa is like one of the greatest grapplers ever, it's like a long journey.
Yeah, but I had the confidence, I had the belief in myself because of the success that I had in the gym prior to that.
Got it.
To that event.
even, and it's one step at a time. First it's the brown belts, then it's the black belts, then it's world class. Okay. George, was there a turning point for you when you thought, like, I can actually do this?
Yes, I always dreamed to become champion, but I think the turning point that there was two turning point, and they were my two losses. First, my losses to Matt Hughes. I went into that fight just to not lose. I was not fighting to win, and it's after the fight when I watched the replay of the fight, I realized I was doing pretty well, but during the fight in my own mind, I was not seeing it that way. I thought I was getting dominated by Hughes like 100%. But when I watched the replay, I was like, man, I can beat this guy. I was beating him until I made that stupid mistake. So I was very frustrating, but that's what gave me mentally the championship level mentality. And then I became a little bit overconfident because I started beating everybody after that. And I start to believe the hype of people when they look at me. They were like, "Oh, he's the new up and coming superstar, and he's gonna be unstoppable." And then when I became champion, I lost to Matt Serra. So before I believe my first failure was because I had a lack of confidence, and my second failure was because I was overconfident. So I think there's a perfect center of confidence. I mean, it's good to be confident because like John taught me, like, confidence is it's like money in your bank account. If you can have all the skills in the world, right? And if you don't have the confidence, it's like you can be a millionaire, but you don't have access to your bank account. So that's a little bit the analogy that John told me. So that's how I feel confidence plays for an athlete. But to be overconfident, I think it's always good to be aware, to be afraid of what can happen. So to have a perfect balance of confidence and fear, to me, that's what mentally gave me the edge to become, I believe, successful in my sport.
Playing off that, John gave me a speech one time, and he was like, you have to be able to, like, flip a switch and turn it off, where, like, a guy like Mayweather or someone who goes out who's super confident and he plays the character of someone, he's like, no one can beat me, I'm the best that there ever was, and that's it. But if you look at him, he actually trains very hard. You can't play the persona of no one can beat me and then have it translate into your life and just think that you're so good that you don't have to do anything and no one can ever beat you. You have to be able to play that public persona of no one can beat me, but then you have to actually do the training to make that happen. You can't believe your own hype and say that, I can just do whatever I want, no one's ever going to beat me. You have to be able to switch between the persona and the actual athlete. And that made a big difference for me.
It's tough because like you dominate such a large fraction of the world in grappling, and George too. Just the perfect dominance after those two. It's hard for the confidence not to just, like, how do you avoid the confidence not becoming a thing that weighs you down, where you completely deludes your mind?
For me, it's just, well, number one, the guys in the gym are so tough. So the guys in the gym that I train with are always like nipping at my butt and always giving me new problems to solve. And for me, it's really just about trying to learn new stuff over time. So that keeps it interesting for me. And it's not really about, no one can beat me. I don't have to train. I don't have to do it. I can do whatever I want. It's more, what keeps me in the gym is more about the fact that I'm learning new stuff all the time and working on something new and progressing to new levels at all times. It's not, I don't just come in and do the same thing over and over again. And that gets boring. You just come in and you don't learn anything new and you just do the same stuff for years at a time and like, okay, this is boring. But when you have new stuff to work on and new goals, short-term and long-term goals to reach, then it makes it interesting.
It's for me, it's a little bit like Gordon says, is the fear. Because sometime in the gym, even before when I was competing, I was getting my butt kicked. But I don't care what happened in the gym. I mean, it hit my ego, of course, because I'm a proud person. I'm a competitor, even in the gym. But it's not a malicious competition in between each other. When you fight, you have to be malicious. You go there to hurt the guy. But it hit me in terms of my pride when I get beat in a gym, of course, but that fear that I don't want it to happen in public, especially not during a fight. That what help me keeps the balance between confidence and fear. You know what I mean? It's kind of weird. It's a mix.
Yeah.
It's a mixture of both that I believe, to me, helped me succeed, to have the right mindset to fight.
And I talk so much shit that I'm like, man, if I lose, this is gonna be rough. So
Yeah, you put a lot of. I mean, that's the hard thing to do when you talk shit. When you play the heel, is so
you have
much
to perform.
The pressure is. I mean, you have to be good under pressure. It's the Conor McGregor thing.